I'm Harper, 28 years old, and I never thought the biggest thieves in my life would be my own parents. Sounds unbelievable, right? But picture this. On a normal morning, I get a notification from my bank. My credit card had just been charged $18,000 in a matter of minutes. My heart stopped. I called the bank immediately, and when the agent read the passenger names on 4 first-class tickets to Hawaii, I went numb. It was my mom, dad, and brother. No asking, no permission, not even a heads up. They had used my credit card to buy themselves a luxury vacation. And worse, my mom texted me, "Thanks for the generous gift. The whole family is so happy about this." Generous? Happy? No, this was theft, betrayal, and a shameless abuse of trust. I know some of you might ask, how could parents do this to their own daughter? But this wasn't just a one-time mistake. It was a reflection of a pattern of financial abuse that had been poisoning my family for years. And this time, I made a decision. Either they stop, or I expose everything. If you've ever felt the anger of being exploited by your own family, hit like, leave a comment sharing your story, and subscribe with the notification bell on so you won't miss what comes next. Because right after this, I'll take you inside. The explosive family meeting where every dark secret was dragged into the light. A childhood inside a fake house. If you looked at my family from the outside, you'd think I grew up in the perfect home, a picture-perfect middle-class American family. A 2-story house with a neatly trimmed lawn, elegant dinner parties my mom hosted just to impress the neighbors, and the image of a successful father running his own insurance company in the heart of Seattle. But the truth? It was nothing more than a stage play, and I was one of the kids forced to live, to breathe inside that lie. From the time I was little, I was taught that appearances mattered more than anything else. My dad, Gerald, used to repeat the same line over and over. People only believe in a successful businessman if he drives a luxury car. No one respects a man in a beat-up sedan, Harper. I still remember the moment he signed off on yet another loan to buy a brand new Mercedes, while my mom whispered in the kitchen, "Gerald, the credit card got declined again at the grocery store today." I was only 10 years old, but I already knew how to tell a Rolex from an Omega, which brands were considered luxury, and that in my family, the bank accounts were always empty, but the image had to shine like gold. My mom, Diane, wasn't any better. She was obsessed with comparisons. Every dinner turned into a report on what the neighbors were doing. The Andersons just booked a cruise to Alaska. But we have to choose the Mediterranean. It's far more sophisticated. I never once heard her say, "Our family would be so happy on this trip." No, for her, vacations or shopping were nothing but a silent competition, a battle she had to win, no matter the cost. Behind those freshly painted walls, our life was a financial nightmare. I still remember one night at an Italian restaurant. When the bill came, my father's credit card was declined. His face flushed red, while my mother forced a smile and pulled out another card. I was 12, and I already knew the truth. We lived on layers of debt, not prosperity. Every time I heard shouting behind the living room door, my stomach twisted into knots. My mother's voice screamed, "You think I don't know how many bills you've been hiding, Gerald?" And my father roared back, "If I don't keep up appearances, how do you expect me to do business? What would you know anyway?" Those words became the soundtrack of my childhood, looping endlessly like background noise I could never escape. My brother James, 4 years older, learned our father's lesson early. By high school, he maxed out his first credit card in just a few months, spending as if money would never run out. And me? Even as a young girl, I knew in my family your worth wasn't measured by kindness or love. It was measured by the brand you wore. What made it even more bitter was how they dragged me into the performance. I was never taught how to save. I was only taught how to hide. Hide the unpaid bills. Hide the canceled credit cards. Hide the payday loans propping up our upper class image. When I was 13, my mother looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Harper, you must always smile when guests are around. Never let them see you worry. Our family isn't poor. Our family is just investing." Investing? I looked around at the peeling walls covered by a fresh coat of paint, the furniture bought on installment plans, and thought, this isn't investing. This is a black hole. By the time I was 15, it all collapsed. The shiny facade burst like a soap bubble. I discovered my father had an apartment in the city with a young employee. My mother wept like a victim, but she herself had been hiding a stack of secret credit cards he didn't know about. Our model two-story home was drowning under 3 mortgages. The family that once bragged about being the pride of the neighborhood dissolved in a bitter divorce that exposed every debt, every lie, every betrayal. Looking back, I realize I never truly had a family. What I had was a stage where my parents played their roles as the glamorous, wealthy couple, and I, the naive child, was forced to play the princess of a paper castle. But castles made of paper don't last, and from those ashes, I had to carve my own path, a path of truth, of numbers that couldn't lie. But here's the thing, when one person in a family finally says no to the lies, the entire machine turns to crush them. And that's exactly what happened to me. Because the moment I tried to break free, my parents made me their next target in an endless cycle of financial abuse. When I became my family's wallet. When my family fell apart at 15, I thought the pain had reached its peak. But I was wrong. That was only the beginning. My father was drowning in debt after his company collapsed, and my mother was buried under a mountain of secret credit cards. Between the two of them, I wasn't a daughter. I was a pawn, a financial asset they could bargain over. Who would claim me for the tax deduction? Who would pay less by calling me a dependent? That wasn't parenting. It was warfare. And I was trapped in the middle of their financial battlefield. When it came time to choose a college, my future became just another weapon in their war. One evening, they sat across from each other at the dining table, with me stuck in the middle, like an object they were fighting to control. My father leaned forward, his voice firm and commanding. "Harper, you should study business. One day you'll take over my company. The Adams name needs someone to carry it forward." But in his eyes, I didn't see care. I saw ambition. He didn't want me to succeed for myself. He wanted a copy of himself, a legacy, even as his business was crumbling. Before I could respond, my mother cut him off, her voice sharp as a blade. "Don't listen to him. You should study law like your uncle. Lawyers are the ones who truly have power. Power doesn't come from insurance salesmen." The fight escalated, their voices rising, clashing like steel. I sat frozen, fists clenched under the table. The hardest part wasn't their disagreement. It was the fact that no one asked me what I wanted. No one cared that I was exhausted from growing up in a house of lies, declined credit cards, and hollow parties thrown just for show. I didn't feel like a daughter. I felt like a pawn, something to be displayed, to be used in their endless game of power and pride. And so I made the first bold decision of my life, a choice that went against both of them: accounting. Not because it was glamorous, not because it promised prestige, but because I craved one thing more than anything else: clarity. I wanted numbers that couldn't lie. After years of chaos and financial deceit, I needed something unshakable: balance sheets, accounting ledgers, cold, hard truths written in black and white. Accounting, for me, wasn't just a major. It was my escape route, my one way out of the suffocating cycle my family had trapped me in since childhood. College wasn't the rosy coming-of-age movie people like to romanticize. For me, it was a battlefield. Every single day, I had to calculate not just my grades, but my hours, my dollars, my very breath. In the mornings, I sat in lecture halls, eyes on the board but mind racing about my next shift. In the afternoons, I rushed to a coffee shop, churning out lattes for impatient customers, swallowing their unreasonable complaints. At night, when I should have been resting, I tutored wealthy kids in math, kids whose parents never once worried about rent or tuition. My friends had time for parties, dates, and weekends of freedom. Me? I counted coins to pay the light bill. I counted hours to see if I could cover next semester's tuition. Some nights I was so drained I fell asleep face down at my desk, books scattered across the floor. But I never allowed myself to stop, because if I collapsed, there would be no one to catch me. By the time I graduated, I carried $60,000 in student debt, a number that would terrify most people. But strangely, I felt relief, because at least that debt was mine. It wasn't born of my parents' greed, their lies, or their endless hunger for status. It was the proof of every late-night shift, every tutoring hour, every ounce of sweat I poured into surviving. The day I hung my diploma on the wall of my tiny one-bedroom apartment, the one I'd scraped together a deposit for, furnished with second-hand chairs from a thrift store, I broke down and cried, not out of simple joy, but out of something deeper. For the first time in my life, I owned something real, something that wasn't tied to my parents, or their fake family image, or the stage play they forced me to live in. It was mine, and no one could ever take it away. That was the moment I made a vow to myself. From this day forward, I will live by the truth, by numbers that don't lie, by the sweat of my own work. And if anyone, even my own family, tries to cross that line again, I will never, ever let them destroy what I've built. My first accounting job in Portland didn't pay much, but it was enough to let me live on my own. I built a strict budget, bought only the essentials, and laid down ironclad rules for myself. Never lend money to family, never co-sign a loan, never hand over my card or bank information to anyone but me. I thought those boundaries would protect me, but I underestimated just how cunning and shameless they could be. It started with a call from my mother. "Harper, can you lend me a little money to fix the bathroom? Just a few thousand. Once I sell the condo, I'll pay you back double." I hesitated. A part of me still hoped she would change, so I gave her 3,000, and I never saw that money again. Then came my father. "Sweetheart, the company's a little short on working capital. Just let me borrow something small. I promise I'll pay you back by the end of the month." And then my brother, James, more blunt than the rest. "Can you co-sign for me on a car lease? My credit history isn't great, but I need a car to get to work." I refused, and instantly the guilt trips began. "Don't you love your mother? You're so selfish, Harper. Family means helping each other." Each refusal felt like a knife in my chest, but I knew the truth. If I said yes, I'd be dragged into the same bottomless pit they'd been living in all their lives. After losing the money I lent my mother, I felt like I'd fallen into a black hole. I tried to convince myself it was just a mistake, that she'd keep her promise, that maybe things would change. But deep down, I knew I'd just been pulled back into the same cycle of financial abuse they'd been spinning for years. That's when I went to therapy. Sitting in a small room across from Dr. Winters, I poured everything out. The debts, the pressure, the guilt every time I said no. He listened quietly, then looked me straight in the eye and said, "Harper, financial health is part of your health. If you wouldn't let someone harm your body, why would you let them destroy your finances?" His words hit me like a slap. I froze for a moment, then burst into tears. For the first time, someone told me I had the right to protect myself, that saying no didn't make me selfish. It was an act of survival. From that day on, I began to change. I was no longer the little girl trapped in my parents' paper castle, forced to smile for guests while unpaid bills piled up in the kitchen. I was no longer the silent daughter who let others dictate her life. I was Harper, and I had the right to say no. 2 years of therapy weren't easy. I had to fight through the guilt, the crocodile tears from my mother, the accusations of being ungrateful from my father. I had to learn to breathe deeply, look them in the eye, and say, "No, I won't lend money. No, I won't co-sign. No, I won't be responsible for your bad choices." Every no was a battle. My hands trembled, my heart pounded, but I forced my voice to stay steady. And each time I grew a little stronger. I thought boundaries would finally make them stop. But I was naive. My parents never knew how to accept defeat. They only stepped back to strike harder, deeper, and more ruthlessly. They shifted tactics. If money didn't work, they went after my emotions. My mother wept on the phone. "If you don't help, I'll live in misery. Don't you have a heart, Harper?" My father sneered at family gatherings. "That's my daughter, all right. Educated, employed, but too stingy to give a penny back to her own family." They painted me as the villain. I remember one cousin whispering after dinner, "Harper, how could you let your mom cry like that? It's just a little money." I bit my tongue, because if I explained the truth, they'd twist it back on me again, turning me into the ungrateful child. By the time I was 27, I thought maybe, just maybe, they were starting to accept my boundaries. Fewer calls, fewer guilt trips. I breathed easier, but in reality, they were just waiting for a bigger opportunity. And it came in the form of a cheerful message in the family group chat. My mother announced with excitement a mandatory family vacation, a chance, she said, to reconnect as a family. Reading those words, I felt a chill run through me. I knew this pattern too well, sweet promises wrapped around hidden traps. But this time, I didn't realize the real storm was only beginning. Because just days later, I discovered the unthinkable. My parents had stolen my credit card to buy first-class plane tickets for themselves, the mandatory Hawaii vacation, the $18,000 trap. I thought that after years of therapy, after drawing firm boundaries again and again, my parents would finally stop trying to invade my life. But I was wrong. To them, boundaries weren't walls. They were locked doors waiting to be pried open. And then came the next trap, one March morning, in the form of a family group chat. My phone buzzed nonstop. When I opened it, I saw that my mother had created a new group, Adam's Family Hawaii 2025. Inside were me, my brother James, his wife Stephanie, Aunt Carolyn, and several cousins. My mother's very first message exploded with exclamation points and all caps letters. "Biggest news ever. After much thought, I've decided this family needs a vacation to heal old wounds. We are all going to Hawaii, 10 days at a luxury resort. Attendance is mandatory. Diane has spoken. LOL." I stared at the word mandatory and let out a bitter laugh. My family never believed in the concept of choice. Replies poured in almost immediately. James and Stephanie sent laughing emojis and hearts. Aunt Carolyn asked about dates. The cousins gushed, "Wow, can't wait." And me? I stayed silent. I needed time to find a diplomatic response, something that wouldn't instantly paint me as the villain. But my silence didn't slow my mother down. Within hours, she had sent 14 more messages, links to 5-star resorts, packed itineraries with exclusive activities, snorkeling tours, helicopter rides over volcanoes, a grand luau dinner. She kept mentioning my name. "Harper has always loved volcanoes, so we have to book the helicopter tour. Harper's obsessed with the ocean, so the snorkeling trip is a must." I had never said any of that, but in my mother's world, lies repeated often enough became truth. That evening, I called James. "What do you think about this? You know I never agreed to go, right?" He hesitated. "Mom said you were the most excited one. She even told us you and she had been planning this since last month." I froze. "No, that never happened. I've never spoken a single word to her about Hawaii." James sighed. "Well, that explains it. I thought it was weird, but Mom kept saying it over and over, so I figured it must have been true." I hung up, a cold shiver running down my spine. My mother wasn't just imposing a trip. She was rewriting the story so that I was the one who initiated it. Over the next few days, she sent out a Google Doc with a detailed itinerary, plus an Excel sheet labeled Expense Tracking. Strangely, there were no actual numbers in the file. I asked directly in the group, "What's the estimated cost per person?" No one answered. Instead, vague comments flooded in. "We all deserve this after everything. Money can be earned back. Memories can't. Don't worry, Harper. You're doing great at work." Then came the private messages. "Thank you for convincing Mom to plan this. The family finally feels united again. Mom said you'd help cover some of the activities. That's so generous of you, Harper." I felt dizzy. Not only had I been painted as the instigator, now I was also cast as the secret financier. 10 days later, Mom scheduled a Zoom call with the entire family. Sitting in my office, I braced myself. I was determined to ask about the money. But for 45 minutes, every time I opened my mouth, someone jumped in with chatter about beaches, restaurants, or helicopter tours. I repeated my question over and over until I finally snapped. "Before we go any further, I need to know the exact costs per person. I have my own budget, and I can't plan blindly." The screen went silent. Then Mom let out a sarcastic laugh. "Oh, Harper, always worrying about money? Fine. Flights are about $1,000 each. The hotel is $300 a night, but we'll share rooms to cut costs. Activities vary, but budget another $2,000. If you can't afford it, just stay home." Her voice was ice cold, dripping with mockery. My face burned hot, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Thanks for clarifying. I'll think about it." Everyone else stared at their screens, avoiding eye contact. I knew what they were thinking. Harper, the stingy one. Harper, the problem. But inside me, rage was rising. I wasn't going to drop $5,000 on a trip I never agreed to. After the meeting, I drafted a polite message to send the next morning, a refusal, blaming work obligations. I wanted to keep it civil, to avoid escalating tensions, but I had no idea that by morning, everything would spiral out of control. Because when I woke up, my phone was buzzing with alerts. 4 charges of $4,500 each had just hit my credit card. The $18,000 scam, when your parents become the thieves. The next morning started like any other, hot coffee in hand, preparing for a client meeting. But within minutes, my phone began buzzing nonstop. At first, I thought it was just the usual messages. Then I looked closer. Transaction alert. 4 charges, totaling $18,000. I froze. Who could possibly spend that much in just a few minutes? I opened the details and nearly dropped my phone. 4 first-class tickets from Portland to Hawaii, booked under the names of my father, Gerald, my mother, Diane, my brother James, and my sister-in-law Stephanie. My heart sank. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, some random fraud. But then, a message from my mother appeared, hitting me harder than any punch. "Thank you for the generous gifts, sweet Harper. Business class will help your father's back pain. We can't wait to enjoy this special vacation with you. Love you so much." My fingers trembled. A generous gift? No, this was outright theft. I immediately called my credit card company, fighting through endless automated menus until I reached a representative. My voice shook with rage. There are four charges of $4,500 each on my card. I did not authorize them. The rep confirmed. Yes, Ms. Harper, those are four first-class tickets booked online with United Airlines. The e-tickets were sent to your personal email. Would you like me to read the passenger names? I swallowed hard. I already knew, but I let him read them. Gerald Adams, Diane Adams, James Adams, Stephanie Adams. My ears rang. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was premeditated. I demanded the charges be canceled, the card frozen, and a new one issued. When I checked my email, I saw the tickets had already been marked read, even though I hadn't opened them. Someone had accessed my email to cover their tracks. My head spun. This wasn't just credit card abuse. It was theft, fraud, and hacking. As I tried to steady my breathing, my phone buzzed again. Another message from my mother. Don't make this a big deal. You know the family needs this trip. Just see it as something wonderful you've done for everyone. I stared at the screen, laughing bitterly. Yes, in her world, stealing $18,000 from your daughter was a wonderful thing. I called United Airlines directly. The rep confirmed. These tickets were purchased online using a stored payment method on your account. Would you like to cancel them? Cancel them immediately. This is fraud. At the word fraud, I could hear hesitation in his voice, like even he realized this wasn't the typical case. My hands were still shaking when I hung up. Then I texted my mother directly. I didn't buy those tickets. I canceled them, reported the charges as fraud, and changed my card. Do not ever use my financial information again. Her reply made my blood boil. Harper, what's wrong with you? We already discussed this. You agreed to help with the costs. Now you're backing out and making me look bad in front of everyone. How could you be so heartless? I bit my lip so hard it drew blood. The lies rolled off her tongue so smoothly that the old me might have believed them. But now I saw the truth. This wasn't a single act of fraud. This was a web of manipulation, carefully spun over years. Within hours, my phone exploded with calls and texts. James stammered, Mom said it was your gift. I was shocked when you changed your mind. But if you don't pay, the whole trip falls apart. My father shouted down the line. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By humiliating your mother and disgracing the family? Then Aunt Carolyn messaged, Harper, don't let money tear this family apart. A trip to heal our bonds is more important than dollars. I laughed bitterly. In their eyes, I wasn't the victim. I was the betrayer for daring to take back what was mine. That afternoon, as I drove back to my apartment, I spotted the sleek black Mercedes I knew all too well parked in the guest lot. My father stood beside it, dressed in a sharp suit, but his eyes were strung tight like a bow. Harper, we need to talk. He opened his arms as if to hug me. I stepped back. How do you even know where I live? Your mother does. It's in the emergency contacts. Sweetheart, don't blow this out of proportion. It's just a misunderstanding. I locked eyes with him. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is theft. This is fraud. His tone softened, coaxing, almost pleading. You know your mother just wants the whole family together. James has bad credit. Travis is unemployed. Your mom maxed out her limit. You're the only one who qualified. We were going to tell you afterward, once everything was booked, so you wouldn't change your mind. Hearing that, my chest tightened. It wasn't an accident. It was a plan, a deliberate scheme without a shred of remorse. I pulled out my phone and hit record. So, you admit you and Mom agreed to use my card without asking? He hesitated, then sighed. Yes, but it was for the good of the family. Family. They always knew how to weaponize that word, turning it into chains that bound me from childhood. That night, I sat in my apartment replaying the recording, tears streaming down my face. What had I been hoping for? An apology? An admission of guilt? A moment where they saw me as an adult instead of a walking wallet? No. To them, I was nothing more than a backup account, a credit line with a pulse. My phone buzzed again, a message from my mother. If you keep pushing this, you'll be the one who destroys the family. Don't make yourself the enemy. I set the phone down and took a deep breath. The pain was sharp, but with it came something stronger, a flame. I wouldn't stay silent anymore. That night, I built a file, screenshots of transactions, saved emails, the recording of my father's confession. I contacted an attorney about financial abuse within the family. This was no longer a private matter. This was a crime. For years, I'd been conditioned to believe I was selfish if I didn't give in to their demands. But now the truth was undeniable. The selfish ones were them. The people who swallowed every boundary and treated their own child as a means to prop up their illusion of wealth. I knew that fighting back would bring a storm. This family had never tolerated anyone breaking ranks. I had seen how they slandered others, how they twisted stories to turn victims into liars, and this time the victim was me. But I was ready. I wasn't the little girl who hid tears in her bedroom anymore. I was an adult, with a career, with evidence, and most importantly, with the courage to finally say enough. And just as I expected, the storm came. Within days, the entire family summoned me to an emergency meeting where, for the first time, I would face 14 relatives and the entire web of lies that had ruled us for years. The confession in the parking lot, when my father threatened to cut me off. I was used to guilt-tripping calls and long, tearful texts from my mother. But I never imagined my father would drive all the way to my apartment just to pressure me. That afternoon, after work, I saw his sleek black Mercedes neatly parked in the guest lot. He stood there with his arms folded, suit pressed to perfection, his smile stiff, like he was gearing up for a business negotiation. But I knew behind that smile was a storm waiting to break. As soon as I stepped out of my car, he moved toward me, arms outstretched as if to hug me. "Harper, sweetheart, I just want to talk. This is all just a misunderstanding." I stepped back, keeping my distance. "How do you even know my address? I never gave it to you." He gave a dry laugh, waving a hand. "Your mom had it in the emergency contacts. Don't worry, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to explain. You're blowing this out of proportion." I crossed my arms, steadying my voice. $18,000 charged to my card isn't me blowing things up. That's theft. His smile hardened, but his tone stayed soft. "You know your mother just wanted the family together. James's credit is shot. Travis is unemployed. Your mom maxed out her card. You were the only one who could. We figured if we asked you up front, you'd hesitate, maybe even say no. So we booked the tickets first, planned to tell you afterward." I froze. That casual confession hit like a slap. Quietly, I pulled out my phone and hit record. "So you admit, you and Mom planned this, used my card without permission, and then lied about me agreeing beforehand?" He hesitated, then sighed. "Technically, yes, but it was for the greater good. You have to understand, this was for the family." For the family. Two words they had weaponized my entire life, tightening around my neck like a noose. I pressed further. "Was this the first time? Or have you done this to anyone else?" He shifted, avoiding my eyes. Finally, he muttered, "Your mom helped James after his divorce. He couldn't qualify for a loan, so she borrowed Jessica's card. Jessica made a fuss at first, but she let it go." My stomach dropped. "And Travis?" He clicked his tongue. "Yeah, once. Your mom redid the kitchen, tried to get financing, but got denied, so she borrowed his card. He wasn't happy, but in the end, he stayed quiet. The blood drained from my face. I wasn't the first victim. This wasn't a mistake. It was a system, a cycle, stealing from family, then silencing them with guilt and blood ties. I clenched my jaw. Do you even hear yourself? This is theft. This is abuse. He stepped closer, his tone sharp now. Don't throw around ugly words like that. Family is about sharing. You have money, you're comfortable. Why be so stingy with your own parents? After everything we've done for you. I cut him off, my eyes burning but my voice firm. What have you done for me? You didn't pay for my tuition. You forced me into a career I didn't choose. You left me drowning in $60,000 of student debt. I built this life on my own, dollar by dollar. So tell me, what exactly have you done for me besides use me? His face turned red, the fake smile gone. He stepped closer, voice dropping to a growl. If you dare expose this, if you drag this outside, then you are no longer my daughter. As of today, consider yourself cut off. You'll be erased from this family. I lifted my chin and held up my phone, the red recording icon glowing. Thank you, Dad, for making it clear. Everything you just said is on record. His eyes widened, frozen for a beat. Then, without another word, he turned on his heel and stormed off, each heavy step echoing across the concrete lot. When he drove away, I finally noticed my hands trembling. I collapsed onto the sofa, my mind spinning. I had the proof. I had heard him admit it with his own mouth, yet instead of relief, an awful emptiness spread through me. This was my father, the man who once held my hand as I learned to walk, the one who drove me to school in the mornings. And now, the same man had coldly declared he was ready to sever blood ties if I dared to resist. In the stillness of my apartment, I replayed the recording. His voice rang out, dry and sharp. Consider yourself cut off. I broke down in tears, but they were no longer tears of weakness. They were tears of rage and of resolve. I understood then, if I stayed silent, it would never end. They would keep stealing from me, from James, from Jessica, from Travis, from anyone naive enough to still believe in the sacred bond of family. I had to choose, stay quiet to preserve the empty title of daughter, or stand up and protect myself, even if it meant being cast out. I wiped my tears, opened my laptop, and began compiling evidence. Screenshots of transactions, emails, the recording I had just captured. I knew the road ahead would be brutal. But for once, I wasn't alone. Within days, the truth began to ripple through the family. Relatives who had stayed silent reached out. Jessica admitted her card had been exploited before. Travis confessed he was still thousands in debt after helping out Mom. Piece by piece, the fragments came together into one damning picture. My parents had lived for years by draining their own family's finances, silencing their victims with guilt and blood ties, and I knew it was time to expose everything. The chance came sooner than expected. My mother called an emergency family meeting with 14 members present. She said it was to clear up a misunderstanding, but I knew better. This would be the greatest confrontation of my life, where truth and lies would collide in front of everyone. The family meeting, when all the truth came out. The appointed day came faster than I expected. My mother texted in the family group chat. Saturday at 2 p.m., everyone at Aunt Carolyn's. This is serious. No excuses. I read it over and over, knowing this wasn't a meeting. It was a secret trial, and I was the accused. When I stepped into Carolyn's living room, I froze. 14 people filled every chair, sofas, dining seats, even folding chairs. My grandmother, who rarely left the nursing home, was there too. The air was heavy. All eyes turned toward me as if I had committed a crime. Mom sat in the center, her eyes red but her gaze razor sharp. Dad stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder like an actor playing the part of a protective husband. She took a deep breath, then began, her voice trembling yet clear. Harper, do you realize how much pain you've caused this family? Everyone was looking forward to Hawaii, to reconnecting. And then you suddenly refused. Not only that, but you smeared me, accused me of stealing your card. I know work has been stressful. The doctor said you've been struggling with memory lapses. I don't blame you. I just want the family to understand and get through this together. I froze. Doctor? I had never seen any doctor for memory issues. This was their old trick. Invent a story, weaponize trust. Aunt Carolyn jumped in immediately. That's right. Diane worked so hard on everything. Harper, how could you agree and then back out at the last minute? A few relatives nodded. I saw the doubt in their eyes, the whispers. In minutes, I had been painted as a liar, or worse, unstable. I drew in a breath, steadying my voice. I never agreed to pay for the trip. And I don't have any memory problem. The truth is simple. My card and email were used without permission. $18,000 charged for first-class tickets for Mom, Dad, and James. That's not an illusion. That's reality. A hiss came from the corner. Dad snapped. She's paranoid. She thinks the whole family is against her. Grandma leaned forward, voice soft. Harper, why would your mother do that? Didn't you promise to help? She told me you did. My chest tightened. Grandma had always believed in Mom's image as the selfless caregiver. Words alone wouldn't be enough. I needed proof. But before I could speak, another voice broke the silence. Jessica, my cousin, stood abruptly. Her voice shook but was clear. I believe Harper because it happened to me too. Last year, Aunt Diane borrowed my card, said it was for a birthday cake. But the bill was for James's car repair. I never got repaid. When I brought it up, everyone said I had agreed to gift it, but I never did. The room went dead quiet. Mom jumped in instantly. Jessica, that was an emergency. James couldn't get to work without that car. Jessica shook her head. No, you told me it was just for a cake. I never agreed to pay $3,000 for a car repair. Then Travis, who usually avoided conflict, spoke up. Same here. Last summer, you said you'd borrow my card for a kitchen remodel deposit until the loan came through. But when the loan was denied, that money was just gone. $8,000. I'm still paying it off. All eyes turned back to Mom. Her face went pale, then quickly hardened. You're all exaggerating. These were little favors. Family is supposed to help each other. The room grew heavier. My brother James, silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was hoarse. Harper's not lying. Mom and Dad did the same to me. They had me open credit cards, take out loans. When I couldn't pay, my credit was ruined. Stephanie found out. We fought constantly, and we divorced. If you want the real reason my marriage fell apart, it was the debt they forced on me. The room erupted in gasps. Stephanie, his ex-wife, nodded. Whispers filled the air. Shock, confusion, disbelief. Mom slammed her hand on the table, bursting into tears. How can you all treat me this way? I only ever borrowed in hard times, always intending to repay. Does raising you count for nothing? Don't I deserve a little understanding? I knew if I didn't act, they'd all drown in her tears and guilt. I pulled out my phone and played the recording from the parking lot. Dad's voice echoed through the room. Yeah, we planned it. If we told you first, you'd say no, so we booked the tickets anyway. Your mom used Jessica's and Travis's cards before, but they stayed quiet. If you expose us, you're cut off. You're not family anymore. The room fell silent. Grandma's mouth hung open. Carolyn stared at my parents like she didn't know them. A few relatives sighed, shaking their heads. Dad's face turned crimson. He shouted, "That recording is illegal. Harper set me up." I met his eyes, voice sharp. Oregon is a one-party consent state. I consented. It's perfectly legal. Chaos erupted. Half the family began demanding answers. Where the money had gone, what other lies had been told. The rest tried to defend, pleading for forgiveness, clinging to respect your parents. Mom cried harder, then pointed at me. "You destroyed this family. It's all your fault." I stood tall, voice steady though my chest burned. "No, Mom, I didn't destroy this family. I only spoke the truth. You destroyed it when you turned love into leverage, when you used family as a weapon to steal." The meeting dissolved into chaos. Mom stormed out, Dad trailing behind, leaving behind a room buzzing with anger, betrayal, and grief. Jessica and Travis came to my side, squeezing my hands in thanks. James sat quietly, but in his eyes I saw something I hadn't seen in years: relief. That night, driving back to my apartment, I realized one thing: my family would never be the same. The secrets were out, the wounds exposed. They might never heal, but at least, finally, the truth had been spoken. Fraud files. When I turned my family into evidence before the law. After that chaotic family meeting, I knew one thing: if I left it at words alone, everything would be buried under fake tears and endless excuses. I had to turn the truth into a legal record, evidence they couldn't deny. I gathered everything I had: credit card statements, the airline invoices, Mom's text thanking me for the Hawaii gift, and even the recording of my conversation with Dad, and brought it to the bank. The financial security officer listened in silence, then slowly nodded. "Harper, what you've described is clearly fraud and identity theft. We'll escalate this to our internal investigations team, but I strongly recommend you go directly to the police." The words cut into me like a blade. I never wanted to see my own parents labeled as criminals, but that was the truth. They hadn't just exploited family ties, they had broken the law. I went to a respected law firm in Seattle. Attorney Carter, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, flipped through the documents carefully. After a long silence, she looked up. "Harper, this isn't just a family dispute. This is systematic financial fraud. If you want, we can file a civil lawsuit immediately. But first, I advise you to make a full report to the police to establish a legal foundation." I nodded, feeling both relieved and devastated. From that moment, I no longer saw my parents as parents, but as defendants. Walking into the Seattle Police Department, my hands were ice cold. The duty officer asked why I was there, and I handed him the folder. When he reached the transcript of the recording, I saw his brows knit tightly. "Do you have the original audio?" "Yes, here." I handed him the USB with trembling hands. He nodded, making more notes. "We'll open a preliminary investigation, but you need to understand, once this moves forward under the law, your family will never go back to the way it was." I gave a bitter smile. "I know, but honestly, we stopped being a family a long time ago." I thought the police report would finally silence them. I was wrong. Mom showed up at my apartment one evening, holding an envelope. She pushed it into my hand, her voice syrupy sweet. "Here's a $20,000 check. Think of it as an apology. All you have to do is withdraw the complaint. Let this go. We can be a family again." I stared at the check, the numbers printed in bold, then lifted my eyes to meet hers. "Mom, $20,000 can't buy back trust. It can't erase years of exploitation, and it can't cover the truth. I refuse." Her face hardened, her eyes flashing with that familiar fury. The sweetness had only ever been a mask. A few days later, Attorney Carter, on my behalf, sent a formal cease and desist letter demanding an end to all harassment and fraudulent activity, warning that any further action would trigger criminal charges. One line was bolded: Any unauthorized use of Harper's financial information will be prosecuted as a crime under Washington state and federal law. I knew my parents had received it because the very next day, my phone went silent. No more frantic calls, no more guilt-laden texts. Just an eerie silence. But silence doesn't mean peace. The family fractured into factions. Jessica and Travis openly sided with me, even submitting more evidence that they had also been exploited. James, my brother, acknowledged the truth but didn't have the strength to confront our parents head on. Some relatives defended Mom and Dad, insisting, "They're old, don't drag this out, just let it go." My family, already a paper castle rotting from within, finally collapsed into rubble. I began blocking numbers, blocking emails, and eventually moved to a new apartment. Each step felt like cutting an invisible cord that had bound me to a toxic cycle. It still hurt. There were still nights I cried, mourning the feeling of being orphaned while my parents were still alive. But I knew this was the only way to survive. Dr. Winters once told me in our final therapy session, "Harper, you have no obligation to maintain a relationship just because it's labeled family. If that relationship poisons you, cutting it off is not betrayal, it's survival." And I chose to believe that. The healing journey, finding peace in the ruins. When every family door slammed shut, I realized I had two choices: let the wounds fester deeper, or find a way to heal. I chose the second path, painful, uncertain, but the only one that could free me from the shadow of the past. I sought out a therapist who specialized in financial abuse within families. In those first sessions, I cried more than I spoke. Each question cut into me like a knife. "When they took your money, how did it make you feel?" I choked out, "Like being robbed, except the thief had my last name." The therapist stayed silent for a moment, then said something I'll never forget. "Harper, money is only the surface. What they truly stole was your right to own your life, and now it's time you take that right back." Session by session, I learned to set boundaries. I practiced saying no firmly, without guilt-ridden explanations. I practiced breathing deeply when shame tried to creep in. I wrote in a journal every night, "This is not my fault. I have the right to protect myself." One day, my brother James called me in desperation, his voice hoarse. "Harper, my credit score dropped below 500. I can't rent an apartment. I can't get a loan. My marriage fell apart because of it. I don't know where to start again." I stayed silent for a long time. I had been angry at James for his years of silence, for letting our parents run unchecked. But hearing his voice break, I understood. He was a victim too. I helped him contact a financial counseling agency, build a debt repayment plan, and dispute the fraudulent accounts. At first, he didn't believe he could recover, but I told him, "If I can do it, so can you. They've taken enough from us. We can't let them take our future too." Watching James slowly rebuild, transforming from a hopeless man into someone careful, responsible, and determined, made me realize healing wasn't just for me. It could ripple outward. I joined a support group for victims of financial abuse by their own families. Each week, we sat in a circle, sharing stories. A woman spoke of how her husband drained her entire pension. A young man choked up describing how his mother maxed out credit cards in his name. I listened, and for the first time in my life, I felt not a one. I shared my story. Someone squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thank you. I thought only my family was this cruel." From that group, I began to reclaim peace. My pain wasn't meaningless anymore. It became a bridge to understand others. Soon, I started attending small workshops at local schools and libraries. At first, I sat in the audience, but one day when the main speaker didn't show, they asked me to step in. My hands trembled, but I spoke. Do you know what's worse than losing money? Losing control of your life because you never learned how money works. The room fell silent. From that moment, I realized I could turn tragedy into teaching. I created small lessons: how to read a credit report, how to avoid co-signing traps, how to budget. I used my own story as an example. At first, the students giggled, but soon they grew quiet, nodding. One student said, "Ms. Harper, you taught me that freedom isn't just moving out of your parents' house, it's living without debt." That sentence warmed my heart. I no longer wanted to hide my past. I began blogging, writing about my journey. My first post was titled, "When Family Becomes the Thief: How I Took My Life Back." To my surprise, it was shared thousands of times, with hundreds of comments pouring in. Some insulted me, airing dirty laundry. But far more wrote, "Your story gave me the courage to leave a toxic marriage. Because of you, I checked my credit report for the first time." I realized what once was my deepest wound had become my sharpest weapon: to protect others. I won't claim I'm fully healed. Some nights I still wake up remembering my mother's sweet smile as she offered me a $20,000 check to buy my silence. Some days I still ache at the memory of my father threatening to cut me off as family. But I also know I've come farther than I ever thought possible. I have a stable job, a warm little apartment, and a community that needs me. Most importantly, I have peace in my own mind, something my parents' money could never give me. That is my journey, from a child locked in a gilded cage to a woman who fought for her freedom. I lost many things: family, money, trust, but I found the most important thing of all: my worth. And to anyone watching this video, if you've ever been exploited, suffocated by toxic ties, please remember, you have the right to say no. You have the right to live a life of honesty, freedom, and self-control. If Harper's story touched you, please hit like, leave a comment with your thoughts or experiences, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Every interaction doesn't just help this channel, it spreads the message: we are not alone, and we deserve to live free.